Hi, I'm Brandon. I love Christmas movies in Norway.
I'm Dan, and I despise Christmas movies in Norway.
Oh, man.
I'm Alonso, and I stand the fjords. And this
Is
the Deck the Hallmark podcast.
Deck the Hallmark, it's his podcast.
Brandon and friends host this podcast. We hope you like this jolly podcast.
Well, hello, everybody.
Boy, oh boy.
It's great to be here today.
Certainly is. It feels like we haven't done this in forever.
I know,
Bran.
but here we are today.
Yes.
Excited to be talking about a theatrical Christmas movie that we missed. We don't get to do this very often, so it's very exciting.
This
And it
one's
all-
a theaters.
theatrically in Europe. It debuted on streaming in the U.S.
it never came here theatrically.
No, I was on the lookout for it, and weirdly enough, like somehow I got on the list of some publicist in London, so they'll send me something like, "Ooh, cool." No, and you can always tell because they always say in cinemas. And
Yes,
not
of
in
course.
theaters.
Cinema.
And it's always, they put the number of the date in front of the
Yeah.
month instead of after. So it's like, that's your tip off that we're not getting it.
That's right.
Yes.
So yeah, we did not get this movie in U.S. theaters, much to our chagrin, because well, we'll talk about it.
It would have been weirder if it wasn't theaters to me. I'm not saying I didn't like the movie. I'm saying like it didn't feel like it felt like in this weird middle ground between a theatrical release and a TV movie.
I had thought that maybe it had because around Christmas time, you kind of get some of these type of movies that
Sure.
pop up. Like there was the Grinch horror movie that made it to theaters. There was It's a Wonderful Knife that made it to theaters. So it just kind of like happens
That
around
one,
the holidays.
that one with Chrissy Metz called like Creature Was Stirring or something.
Yeah. So I think I think that's why I thought that maybe it had, but nevertheless, it is what we were
Should've done your
talking.
research.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I do my research by just asking Alonso. He's the best Google that I know when it comes to this type of stuff. Alonso, you're having a busy time right now because you are recording the audiobook for your upcoming book. How exciting for you!
I am, and I'll tell you, there is nothing quite as exhausting as spending 6 hours in a small room reading your own copy. And also reading your own copy out loud is a guaranteed way to make you think you've made a terrible mistake and you need to redo everything. So that's been my experience anyway. I don't know what other authors have encountered in doing their audiobooks, but I'm sure it's fine. I'm my own worst critic. It'll be, pick it up when it comes out in May. Hollywood Pride,
I'm going to be listening to it on Audible. You know that I am. I'm also going to pick up a print copy, and I encourage everyone to do both, obviously.
Please.
But yeah, are you kidding me? The soothing sounds of Alonso Duralde reading?
You might even listen to that one at regular speed.
Well, let's not get crazy. Everything is a 1.7 for me on Audible. I think you want me to read it at one time?
Well, it's just Alonso's.
I'll slow down.
That's what you should do, a slower recording version for Dan.
Get back in the studio for another 30 hours for that. I do have a question about audio recording, Alonso. How many times do you need another take? Like, is it one of those things where as long as you're not messing up, one take is good, or are they constantly asking you need to read that line over again?
I mean, yes, if I'm doing not terribly, they'll just let it go through. But very often it's like, could you slow down and pronounce that word again? We kind of lost it there somewhere. I do a lot of, I'm starting the sentence. I'm starting the sentence and trying to get all the way through it.
Yeah.
So that's just me, like making myself do multiple things.
The idea of editing audio for an audiobook sounds like my least favorite job. But like if you had to ask me to do a job I would hate forever, it's taking all of these audio files and making it sound seamless. It just gives me the just to think about it.
Thank heaven for professionals, because it's the kind of thing where I'll stop in the middle of a sentence and I'll pause for a second, and then I'll pick, as long as I pick up like after a comma, basically, they can splice it together. And
there you go.
Now, is there someone like,
thank you for all of that.
Is there someone following along with you to make sure that you said what you're supposed to say. Like sometimes when you read it, you know what you're trying to say, and at least I do. I know what I'm trying to say, and I miss.
Seems like a very brand-centric
I know.
question.
I miss an A.
You know when you read it doesn't make sense? Is somebody there to make it make sense?
I mean, thankfully, I'm not married to every word, so I'm allowed to I can change a verb tense if I feel like I didn't quite nail it. One thing I learned that I never thought about before, but if ever in a book you write something like in these pages, blah, 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 you have to change that to in this audiobook because this is its own separate thing and there are no pages in it.
Ooh, fair enough.
Yeah.
We're learning so much.
And the countdown's on Hollywood Pride. That is what the date is in May, correct?
May 14th. Yes. Audiobook, Kindle, book, the whole 9 yards. And yeah, even if you do get the audiobook, you'll want to get, I think, the Kindle or the physical book because first of all, it's gorgeous. The photos that TCM has dug up for this thing are just beautiful.
What size are we talking?
It's a but it's a coffee table book. It's got a dust jacket, the whole thing. And then also there's sort of some listy stuff in the back of each chapter of more people and more movies that I don't do in the audiobook because it would just be like a list of names and titles. So for the full shebang, you really want. Are
you doing a book release / Alonso's birthday party that week?
I should. I know that is the week of my birthday. I am taking it to as many places as I can. Watch this space. I will be hopefully coming somewhere near wherever you are to sign books, maybe screen a film with somebody. I don't know, but I'm just trying to get out there as much
perhaps.
We're not gonna
maybe even.
That Greenville. I'd love to hear that.
You ever feel like he's about to get too big for us?
Every day.
We're gonna lose him
since he called in 2018, Brandon.
Yeah.
Who else is going to give me an excuse to watch and talk about this stuff?
True.
I ask you.
Let's talk about there's something in the barn. There's something. Oh, come on.
I don't know.
Too soon.
It's unnecessarily mean. I don't know why I said
it. There's something in the barn. Jax would have laughed at that joke.
She would have.
She would have loved it.
She would have. She'd be the first.
There's something in the barn, which is on right now. You can watch on the Netflix.
That's right.
And is trending on the Netflix. When we watched it, it was like number 8, I believe, right now. So congratulations.
So we're not the only ones in March watching Christmas.
Praise God. Premiered on 23 September 2023 at Fantastic Fest.
Ooh, I hear that fest is fantastic.
In Austin, Texas. Didn't see it coming.
Well, it was on one screen then.
That's right. I was not wrong. And released in Norway by the Scandinavian Film Distribution on 10 November 2023. And then in the United States, we got it 1
I think we're good if you just want to start whenever.
I mainly just wanted to talk about Fantastic Films, a festival I didn't know existed, but would love to come.
If it was shown in Austin.
It's a genre fest. People love it.
If it was shown in Austin, that's when we got it.
It's fantastic.
All right, go.
No, came to streaming.
Okay, whatever.
Fantastic Fest.
But no, I don't want to talk about this. Just do your thing.
The movie kicks off, and there's, believe it or not, something in the barn.
What?
Making a someone in the barn. This guy comes out of the barn. He's got a chain, and he connects the chain to his big old tractor. The tractor, though, is not working. It seems that some wires have been cut. And he seems very committed to get rid of this barn. So he pours gasoline all throughout the barn. Then a baby stroller comes rolling in with a giant bear trap in it. He tries to light the fire, but the lighter is not working. He then hears something in the barn, so he decides now's a good time for me to climb to the second story of this barn. Suddenly, he gets hit by a giant ball of fire, which sends him flying out the window. And now he's on fire. Tough day for that guy. Cut to this family. They are driving through the Norwegian mountains. They immediately get scared by a couple of meese.
Couple of meese?
Couple of meese.
Moosin?
The moose? Just got moosed. They arrive at this house, and we find out that he inherited it from his uncle, who... I don't know if you know, he died.
R.I.P. Obviously.
The house is beautiful. Then we see the barn in the backyard. And between you and me, I do think there might be something in that barn. More on that soon. The family is made up of Bill and Carol. They're the parents. And Lucas and Nora, they are the teenage kids. Bill has plans to fix up the barn and have people stay in it like an Airbnb type thing. Lucas is poking around at the barn and sees a bear trap stroller. Maybe you've heard about it. And some other random things that kind of start shifting around. He runs out of the barn and he says to his parents, "There's something in the barn!" They shrug it off. I'm sure it's nothing. The next day, they head into town, and everybody is very skeptical of this family and very nervous about somebody living at this haunted barn. Lucas learns about something called a barn elf. Apparently, if you treat a barn elf well, it's going to be nice to you.
Barn elf a cookie.
Yes. Yes.
If you ask for a bowl of porridge.
That's exactly right. You know the story. Stop me if you've heard it.
Give them a bowl of porridge.
If you don't treat it nice,
They won't
though,
saw your face in half.
they're gonna be very mean.
That's right.
They have a very nice side and a very mean side. You want to be on the nice side. Lucas assumes we have a barn elf. What other explanation? He buys into the barn elf thing immediately. He goes to the barn to introduce himself to the elf, and sure enough, a barn elf comes out, takes the cookie, and is he's going to town on this cookie. He loves it. Lucas then gives him another, but bumps into the ladder, which spooks the elf, and he disappears. He does not like sound. But it appears that he is on the elf's good side because the elf clears the snow and then asks for some more cookies. Guy really loves cookies. His dad, though, decorates the house for Christmas, and Lucas is like, this is bad news. The barn elf. He doesn't... Three things you need to know. He doesn't like lights. He doesn't like noise. He doesn't like change. These lights are all of those things.
Yeah,
and the family is like, okay, whatever. But the next day they come out and all the decorations, they are destroyed. Lucas is like, told you, barn elf. They decide to throw a house party, with noise to help make some friends. The barn elf is not happy.
In the barn.
In the barn, of all things.
It's a barn party.
It's a barn party. Everybody gets super drunk at the party, and the barn elf is just watching from underneath, kind of like... And it's unfortunate for him because he ends up getting puked on, which is really unfortunate.
Insult to injury for the barn elf. Yeah.
It really is.
We've all been to that
We
party.
sure have. Lucas.
Somebody puked on the barn elf. If I had a nickel.
Oh, boy. Lucas tries to put an end to the party, but it doesn't work. In the middle of the night, the elf breaks into their house, tears apart the kitchen. Bill tries to find out who's making all this ruckus and ends up getting pushed down the stairs to the basement, and the elf locks the door. Then Carol comes down to see what the heck is going on, and the elf is about to attack her, but Lucas comes downstairs and turns on the light, which obviously causes the elf to scurry off. Lucas decides to make the elf some porridge because, as Dan so perfectly said, that's the next step.
That's the next step. Christmas Eve porridge.
That's exactly right. Supposed to make the elf happy. That night for dinner, his dad made this disgusting Norwegian dish, and no one liked it. So being hungry, Bill decides he's going to just eat the porridge in the fridge. And Lucas is like, WTF, Dad? That porridge is for the barn elf. And he's like, all right, man, sorry, whatever. Lucas decides I'll bring the nasty dinner to the barn elf. Maybe he just likes any food. He does not. The elf hates this food. It's Christmas Eve, and Bill has hired a guy to come to the house and play Santa. When the Santa guy arrives, he sees the elf in the distance and assumes that it's Lucas. So he goes by the barn to see what Lucas is doing. It's not Lucas. It's the barn elf. He starts banging on the barn with a sledgehammer, and then he turns around and Santa's like, oh, wow, you're not Lucas at all. The elf hits the barn one more time, causing an icicle to fall down and impale his head. And then he hangs him with Christmas lights. Tough day for Santa. Bill wants to know what's keeping Santa so long, so he goes outside to see maybe he's here or whatever, and he discovers Santa via the lights, having a tough day. They all get in the car to leave because, hey, there's a killer among us. The car won't turn on. probably cut a wire. That's his MO.
Yeah, classic.
The elf then gets on the car, starts hitting the windshield with this sledgehammer. They shoot wiper fluid at him. That throws him off the car, and then they turn on the lights, which, as we all know, elves hate the lights. He yells loudly 3 times. We know what that means. A whole plethora of elves begin to come out of the barn. It's the 3-yell
plethora. Saw them live.
Yes. They're able to successfully fight them off for now. A police officer comes on a snowmobile to see what's going on, and she's like, barn elves are not real. She then hears her snowmobile turn on and is like, what the heck's going on there? It's a barn elf. Barn elf's driving a snowmobile. And runs the police officer over, causing blood to shoot all over the family. They run back inside to hide in Nora's room, which while they're there, the elves discover alcohol downstairs. They're going nuts. They're having a party. We also see an elf accidentally shoot his buddy and himself with a gun. It is a scene that they did. So, Bill and Lucas go to try to find help while Nora and Carol are left to fend off the elves once they kind of start to attack the room. They end up getting captured. Bill and Lucas discover that there's an underground tunnel under the barn that takes them to the elves' village. We all know it. We all love it. They find Nora and Carol. They're tied to a post. Lucas spots his barn elf. And he kind of has done this motion with him where he touches his heart
Never give up,
throughout the
never surrender.
movie.
That's right.
And he sees the elf. He puts his hand on his heart. And that is when this barn elf is like, you're my boy, Blue, and decides that he is going to help this family go and try to escape from this elf village. So they're all heading back, and Nora, they get back to the barn, and it is now surrounded by bad elves. Nora sees gas that is spilled from the snowmobile, so she lights a paper airplane on fire. She's really good at paper airplanes, and that causes the entire barn to explode. They're saved, but their barn elf now has no home. They have destroyed the barn, so they bring him to the elf museum that they have downtown, obviously, where he can live in peace.
He belongs in a museum.
And the movie ends with them all looking up and seeing the northern lights. And that, my friends, was There's Something in the Barn.
We did it.
We did it, everybody. We are going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll break down There's Something in the Barn from Fantastic Fest here on Deck the Hallmark. Welcome back, everybody. We are talking about There's Something in the Barn, the 2023 Norwegian thriller. Norwegian thriller. Let's start with a hot take, and let's start with our good friend Alonso. Alonso, what did you think of There's Something in the Barn?
Well, first of all, just so you all know, Fantastic Fest is like a real thing. Like
Yes.
it's the Alamo Draft House people put it on. It's like a big genre.
Been to that
film
Alamo
festival,
Draft
so
House.
Yes. In Austin, Texas.
In
so
Austin,
it's-
We
Texas.
both have. Yeah.
It is so it has
a
actually
great name.
just gives this movie some credibility to have played at Fantastic Fest.
Fest.
I like this movie a lot. I was excited to hear about it when they were announcing it. I was hoping it was going to open theatrically in the U.S., but then when it went to streaming, I reviewed it off of that just because I've been a big Martin Starr fan ever since Freaks and Geeks. Do I feel extra old now that this actor who I first saw playing a high schooler is now playing the father of a teenager? Sure. Yes, of course. But nonetheless, this is my sort of sweet spot of horror in that there's enough stakes to make it tense and that you worry about what the outcome is going to be, but not so much that it's hard to watch the screen. I thought it was funny. I think the whole culture shock of the American family trying to figure out Norway and the Norwegians and their assumptions about what Americans are like is funny. I dug it. I'm a fan.
I also dug it. This movie was giving me Krampus vibes, which we loved. We saw it in the
Krampus.
theaters. It is a movie that I watch every Halloween time as a nice transitional from Halloween to Christmas. And I might begin to throw this movie into that same mix. It's very, very fun. And I would say, like, my wife, who does not like horror movies also loves Krampus, and I think that she would also really dig this movie because it's silly enough. Like no one's really scared of these barn elves. They're just fun, and they're going around and they're just causing chaos, and it's very fun. And so this is a really great one of those like scary Christmas movies that you can watch even if you're not a big thriller horror fan.
They're like Gremlins with
yes, they really are. And so unlike whatever that movie was we watched from Shudder last year, this is like on the other side. Like I think that this is a kind of an all play, and even if it's
all play for adults.
Yes,
yeah,
there's of course
yes,
some
yes,
language, a lot of blood, all of that, but it's like so over the top that that it's no longer scary. And so I think it's a really fun movie. Dano?
Yeah, I think early on the movie tonally kind of lost me. It felt like they had to throw a teenager saying an F word in occasionally to remind you it wasn't a kid's movie. Like it feels very just like plucky and like the elf's going to actually be their friend for like the first 30 or 40 minutes. And then they finally allow this thing they cut it loose. About 40, 45 minutes in, the next hour is like that fake blood splattering, very creative death scenes, really funny stuff, like funny horror. If you enjoy that genre mashup, I think you'll really enjoy this. There's some very specific Norwegian humor that I found funny in this movie. The last hour is an absolute blast. The first 35, 40 didn't quite land for me, but I felt like the last hour made up for it and was a ton of fun. And it did make me think I would have liked to see it on the big screen. So it was salvaged for me, and Martin Starr, being as deadpan as he normally is, he's playing more of just like a goofy dad in this movie, which is different. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed how much fun they had, especially with like, I'll get to it in the feels. I enjoyed how much fun they had with how crazy they got with some of these elves and some of the death scenes in this movie.
Well, and I will say it's impressive because the elf attacks really happen with about an hour left in the movie. And you're like, how are they, what are they going to do?
And it's relentless from that point. It doesn't let up. It's really, really fun.
It didn't. Yeah. It still didn't feel long despite having an hour-long elf attack sequence. So kudos to them for that. It's time for All the Feels, where we talk about what in this movie gave us those feels. Alonso.
Well, I know Dan saying he didn't like the lead up in the beginning of the film, but I kind of like the idea, especially after all of the Hallmark movies that we have all watched. This is what really happens when city people show up in a small town, which is that the people in the small town are like, who are you? What do you want?
Yep.
You're going to open a what? Really?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yep.
I thought that to me felt like a balm after the many sort of, after all the gazebos. That felt like an honest rendering of like what this scenario, how it would actually play out. So that was my biggest feel. And then just the fact that I think that, there is a delicate juggling act in mixing comedy and horror where if you tip over too much into one, you're going to negate the other one. And this one to me felt like it managed to be scary and funny all the way through to the end.
I didn't really know what to expect from what the something in the barn was. I didn't really read into it beforehand. And so when we get the story of the barn elf, I'm like, all right, what are we going to do here? And then when the barn elf, one, ends up being real, and two, finally reveals itself to Lucas, I was so happy. It was so like funny and also sweet, like kind of I mentioned E.T. while we were watching it, but it is kind of like this kid finds this thing in the backyard and it's like, what is this excitement, this like, hey, here's a cookie. It was all like, I love that whole scene in the barn when he discovers the barn elves for the first time. I just love that scene. Dano?
There's a police officer in this movie that keeps showing up to the house on her snowmobile and keeps basically telling them they're not seeing anything, like it's like a fox or it's a whatever. And every scene's really funny, and they play on the idea the police officer doesn't even carry a gun. And all that's well and good, but, and a little bit of a spoiler here, if you don't want the movie spoiled, maybe mute it at this point, but all the way up to her death being one of the funniest things like very dark humor, but the way that the elves kill this police officer had me in stitches. It was really, really funny. And that was when I knew this movie had won me over, was they fully went for it there. And that whole part of this film was so great. So I really enjoyed that.
Let's take one more quick break. We'll come back and we'll get to the wait, what, and the
What the flicks?
Yeah, it is. It is that. It is that.
Don't call it that.
Here on Deck the Homer.
Whatever happened to What the Flick, Alonso? Why don't you guys do that show anymore?
We were fired. That's why.
It's breakfast all day.
Hey, but we kept the band together. It's breakfast all day.
That's all you can hope for.
It's wonderful too. I love that you split it up into different. Every movie has its own video, or that helps me out to only listen to the ones I've seen. It's very nice for me. So.
Thank you. Yeah, right here on YouTube. If you're listening here on YouTube, you can go subscribe to Breakfast All Day. Where's our Deck the Netflix graphic? What happened to that?
We're all Deck the Homework all the time now, Alonso, and that's how it's always been.
Well, okay. I'm a believer in branding. That's fine.
It's time for the wait, what, is where we talk about what in this movie. We just go, wait, what? Alonso.
Weirdly, I got nothing. Like, I mean, once you buy into the concept that barn elves exist and that there are rules to follow, much like, again, the Gremlins, the movie kind of plays by its own rules. And so, within that framework, there's nothing I can point. I go, well, that would never happen, because they kind of lay out what's going to happen and how and why. So yeah, I am wait whatless on this one.
Wow.
I have a few.
He's wait whatless.
Wait whatless.
It is some of mine. Yeah. Like, it is tough because you have to suspend so much disbelief here that it's crazy to complain.
Yeah. You're within a fantasy framework, but as long as they follow the rules within that framework, they can go to town.
Yes.
It does set up 3 rules for getting along well with barn elves. One is no loud noises. One is no lights. They don't like the lights. And one's no changes. And that's why when a barn elf discovers a snowmobile, took me by surprise that it got on to snowmobile, turned on, loud noise.
Yes.
Lights on.
That's right.
Lights, and it's discovering something new for the very first time. Doesn't seem to bother him one bit, and in fact seems to love it. And I'm not so sure that these rules. I think they actually do a lot of things. They throw a house party.
The gun is new.
The gun is new.
How
loud
about
noise.
The whiskey and the television set that's blinding.
They throw a party.
Yeah.
What I think once they actually begin to experience the loud noises, the bright lights, and the something news, I think they're actually pretty big fans.
It's their rum spritz.
Yes, they're going nuts. They're going nuts. I did get a good chuckle out of the notion that teenagers store moonshine in their rooms. You know how teenagers are always drinking moonshine. That's the teenagers'
They get
drink
a hold of it
choice.
at the party.
Well,
but she gets.
They said the guy at the party who's got the plastic jug that says like 97% on it.
And then last but not least, I do love that this barn elf, essentially turns on his own people for what I think is a total of 3 cookies over the course of 2 days. He is so like,
he pulls a reverse Avatar.
that's my guy. Yeah, he's like, this is my guy. He gave me 3 cookies. He gave me 3 cookies. He taught me this thing. There's nothing I can do.
There's nothing I can do.
These barn elves gotta die.
And he tried with the lutein.
Yeah. And he blew up his house. He gave up so much for the price of 3 cookies.
Yes.
And so shout out to him. Dano?
Exactly how many cookies does Lucas have access to? Because I see him with over half dozen in an evening at one point eating them, and they're in the middle of nowhere. Is he eating all of the family's cookies? Like, I would be upset unless there's just a closet with bukus of cookies. I'm going to be a little bit upset at Lucas
For eating all the cookies.
It also is, and this is part of suspending your disbelief, but the family not buying into something crazy is going on, and the town not buying into the fact that something crazy is going on, it takes them forever to jump on board with Lucas here. especially when the people in the town continually tell you, hey, the barn may be haunted, but are we down for a party in there? You bet we are.
They also have an elf museum
They
downtown.
do. Yeah. They are.
Right, but they think it's a legend. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. It takes them a while. All of these.
And they're not going to trust the Americans.
No, that's more than fair.
But his own family doesn't trust him until they see the elves themselves after a while. All of these Norwegians know English, which helps us. We don't have to read subtitles at that point, but that's great. They all know it. It's fantastic. It's good for all of us on board. If you believe that porridge solves the problem, okay? So like at one point, like he's angry. He's a real South Pole elf at this point. Like he's an angry elf. And this guy says if you give the elf porridge on Christmas Eve, then all is forgiven. Like it's all copacetic. We're good to go. If you believe that is true, you got, even if you're 12 or however old Lucas is, you got to make more than one bowl of porridge, dude. Like you can't risk it all in one bowl of porridge. You got to make a vat of porridge, a pot of porridge, more than one serving of porridge. I feel like if you know the elves are going to like raise hell if you don't get this porridge, you can't risk it all in one bowl, right? You can't. Go ahead.
I'll say this: that I mean, he thinks there's one elf, and so I get the one bowl. But why is he waiting?
Yeah.
Like, it's Christmas Eve
Get
all
it out
day.
there, buddy.
Like you make it. Yeah, deliver. Like it doesn't have to sit in the fridge. You're not waiting for nightfall or something. Like
for
sure. Get it in there.
And
I do believe the Norwegians speaking English. That's been my experience of Europe. Everyone speaks English
all the time,
and they're like they don't want to hear Americans butcher their language.
I would be fine with that in a big city. In a small town of Norway, everyone that comes to this barn party speaks fluent English. That was a bridge too far for me, but I appreciated it at the same time. And then lastly, this is an actual filmmaking one, but it is funny at the same time. They, the stepmom and the daughter make moonshine bombs. So they get these ornament balls and they pour moonshine in them and then they light, I guess the ornament has a fuse on it, and they throw them down at the elves. And later on, they throw them and they all explode. Well, the first one that comes down, the elves are all looking at it like, what's this? And it's this really comical scene where it explodes and the elves go flying, like just scattershot. The problem is dude is holding that and the explosion clearly comes from the ground. Like it's so evident that the ground is rigged to explode. And so he's holding this and then you see the snow blow up from underneath him. And that was like unfortunate in the cutting room there. That's all I got.
Read a physics book.
Yeah,
Dan.
come on, just one.
It's time for What the Flicks.
Moonshine bombs explode from the ground, even if you're holding them.
Even if you're holding it. It's time for What the Flicks, is where we wonder what could have been, maybe having us some clarity to any questions that we still have. Alonso?
So, okay, the idea is he has uprooted his family from California. They're moving to Norway. They're going to open a B&B in the barn. End of the movie, there is no barn left.
Correct.
So I'm wondering, either they leave or they stick around and they build a new barn. And then what's the rule on new barns? Like, does an elf just show up and assign itself to your barn? Do you have to hire one? Like, I need to know, because clearly, you know, if they hate change, they these old barns, they've been hanging around forever. But I need a new barn policy here, because I'm confused about how that would
Mine
work.
was similar, whereas all of those tunnels underneath the barn are still very much in play. So are they still going to inhabit whatever barn shows up or not, which was mine, which is very similar to what you're saying. It seems like they didn't really do anything. They fixed a symptom, not the actual problem itself. And so it sets up nicely for something in the barn too, I think.
Yeah.
If that's possible.
And if they do build a B&B, is it going to be a thing where, like, oh, just so you know, there is an elf in the barn. Please don't make any loud noises or turn lights
and
on.
make sure the porridge, the whole thing. Loves cookies.
Yeah, surprise. Mine's also about the tunnel system, and just the geography, how it all kind of, because you go down and then you go up and around. I don't know where
the topography
pops up. I don't know.
What's that Gerard Butler movie where he's in prison, but he's doing all this stuff around the city and nobody knows how he's doing it? Do you know what I'm talking about, Alonso? It's just
I thought I had seen every terrible Gerard Butler movie, but perhaps I missed this.
Aaron, you know it?
I'm.
It sounds familiar enough.
I've seen it.
It's not the one where somebody dies because the phone blows up, right?
It's what's it called? Law-abiding citizen.
There it is.
Is what it's called.
Yeah, that's the one where the phone blows up. Yes,
but he's in prison. But he's, spoiler alert for those of you that are about to check out Law-abiding Citizen, he's somehow dug a series of tunnels under the prison that allows him to leave and commit these atrocious acts to get revenge and then go back into prison. Oh my gosh!
Perfect alibi. What are you gonna do?
He's got his alibi. There you go. What a classic, Law-abiding Citizen.
I kind of want to watch it.
Yeah, you would love it.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, it's out there. We did it, everybody. Congratulations. We have gone to Fantastic Fest and beyond.
Yeah, we have.
And now we got to come back to Earth, and we're going to check out next week Christmas of Yes on the OWN network, which you can find it on Max, but also it's on the OWN network's YouTube page in its entirety. So this is actually one that is out there and is legally on YouTube, on the station's actual YouTube page.
Great.
So lots of different ways you can watch this if you want to. Join us next week for that. Until then, maybe the first to wish you a Merry Christmas.
Deck the Hallmarks of Bramble Jam podcast is produced by Aaron Shea. For more information on Deck the Hallmark, you can go to deckthehallmark.com. For more information on the Deck the Hallmark family, you can go to bramblejamplus.com. Deck the Hallmark is presented by Philo TV. For a free trial of Philo, go to philo.tv/DTH.